Alpen Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Good day, students. Today we are going to start with the third session in secretarial practice in the first chapter only, issue of shares. Now, before I continue with the lesson, I will just revise with you what we did in our last class. Now, in our last class, we had studied about secondary markets, where I told you the trade takes place between the investors, directly between the investors. We have seen what are the functions of a stock exchange, where there is safety of security, economic growth, liquidity, it encourages the habit of saving. These are the functions that we learned about a secondary market. Then we studied about listing of shares, where we learned that shares are included in the official list of a stock exchange. Now, when you want to list your shares at the stock exchange, you saw what are the requirements. You have to give your application form, documents of the company like the memorandum of association, articles of association, prospectus, statement in lieu of prospectus. Then if you are entering into an undertaking with underwriters, all this information we have to supply to the stock exchange. Then we saw what are the benefits, of listing of shares at a stock market. So, the advantages are two: advantages to investors and advantages to companies. This is what we went through. Then we also learned about demat of shares, dematerialization of shares, where in demat of shares we have learned where the physical shares are converted into electronic data and stored in computers at the request of the investor. Directly the company does not do it, it is done only at the request of the investor. Then I explained to you what is a depository. I told you a depository is a bank for securities. And in India we have two depositories, that is the NSDL and the CDSL, the two depositories in India. Then we learned who is a depository participant. A depository participant is a person who acts as a link between the depository and the investor. He is a link. Whenever you have anything to be done with the depository, we go through a depository participant. Then we study the advantages of demat, like how there is safety when you transact in the electronic mode. Then how you get SMS alerts, your cash is directly credited to your bank account, and so forth. Then we did the procedure of demat, where we learned that the investor has to fill in a dematerialized request form, DRF, and along with the share certificate he gives it to the depository participant. That was regarding demat of shares. And a very small topic we did on remat of shares, where in rematerialization of shares the electronic shares are converted into the physical certificate. So, this is what we learned in our last lecture in the second part of issue of shares. Now, today I am going on with the third part. Now, what we are going to touch on today is application of shares, allotment of shares, return as to allotment, and calls on shares. Now, over here basically we are going to study all the procedures: procedure of application, procedure of allotment, and procedure of calls on shares. Now, with the procedures we study the provisions. Provisions means what are the things that are required when you apply for the shares or company allot shares to you or calls on shares is done. Now, only for application of shares, you don't have provisions, but in all the remaining procedures, we have the provisions and the procedures. So, now today let us begin with application of shares. Now, application of shares procedure. Now, students, please remember when I say procedure, it means you have to go through the answer step by step. When it is a procedure, we cannot skip the steps. From the first point, you cannot jump to the fourth, then to the sixth and come back to the third. Procedure, it has to go in the order that is given to you. So, please make that clear in your mind when you are studying procedures. Okay? And for procedures, you have to study all the points. For procedures, you have to study all the points. You cannot study any 4, any 5, any 6. You have to study all the points. Please remember this. Okay? That is procedures. Now, coming to application of shares procedure. Now, the first thing a company has to do is they have to issue a prospectus. So, application stage relates to the issue of prospectus and receiving applications from the public. Now, what is a prospectus? All of you know what is a prospectus. A prospectus is a document of the company which is issued to the public in order to know about shares. What kind of shares, what is the amount of shares, all information about shares of a company. Now, to make it more simpler to you, now when you joined in your higher secondary, okay, when you went to fill in your form, a prospectus is issued to you and you take a form, an application form for the stream that you want to join in. It may be commerce, it may be arts, it may be science or vocational. But what you learned when you went through the prospectus, you came to know about the school, who is the staff there, what are the subjects offered to you, what are the streams offered to you, okay, and some more information about the higher secondary. And you took your application form for the stream that you are interested in, maybe commerce or arts or science. So, what you did, you got the prospectus and the application form. So, the same relates to a company over here. Now, when the company is issuing shares to the public, what they do is they issue a prospectus and an application form. So, those who are interested in buying the shares of the company, they will take this from the company. Usually the company goes through a bank. Now, as I am teaching you, I will let you know how it is done. So, now we will see what is done. Now, the first point is decisions relating to issue of shares. Now, certain decisions have to be taken with regard to shares. Now, in a company, the directors are the persons who take decisions relating to shares. Any matter of the company is decided by the board of directors, not by single director alone, not the chairman alone or the secretary alone. They have to have a meeting, and in that meeting they will take decisions of a company. Please remember that in all the procedures the directors play a very important role. So, now we will see what the directors are going to decide about. Now, the first thing they have to decide about is the total amount of capital to be raised by the issuing of shares. So, how much of capital is required by the company? That is the first thing you have to know, how much capital you need. Then they will decide what type of shares and the face value of each share. When I say type of shares, it means whether they are going to issue equity shares or whether they are going to issue preference shares. And face value means what is the amount per share. When I say face value, all of you know it is the cost of each share. So, this will again have to be decided by the directors. Then the terms of issue. Terms means conditions, terms and conditions of issue. How much you pay on application, what is the date of payment, where it has to be paid. Okay, so the terms and conditions of issue will have to be mentioned over here, the decisions taken by the directors. Then the directors have to decide whether they want to list the shares at a stock exchange. Now, the earlier lesson we did listing of shares at a stock exchange. So, this decision of listing of shares is taken by the directors right at the time of application of shares. Okay, right at the time the directors are issuing the shares to the public. Then who are going to be your bankers? Appointment of bankers. Which bank are you going to request to do the work for you? Okay, so you appoint your bankers of the company, and again you have to decide about underwriting of shares. Now, when I say underwriting of shares, it means whether you are entering into a contract with the underwriters. A reminder again, underwriters are people who buy the remaining shares not bought by the public. Okay, so these are all the decisions that have to be taken relating to issue of shares, and taken by whom? By the board of directors. Then we go to the next point, permission of the stock exchange. Now see, when permission of a stock exchange means public companies make an application to the stock exchange for securities to be dealt with at a stock exchange. Now, this is listing of shares at a stock exchange. So, when you want to list your shares at a stock exchange, you cannot just go directly and say I want to list my shares. You have to submit an application form along with the documents. Okay, earlier lesson that we did. So, you have to submit all this to the stock exchange if you want your shares to be dealt with at a stock exchange. Then filing of prospectus. Now, I explained to you what is a prospectus. Now, we will see regarding the filing of prospectus. A draft copy of the prospectus. Now, when I say the draft copy of the prospectus, it means a rough copy of the prospectus. You make a rough copy first. Okay? Then this copy of the prospectus is shown to the directors of the company. If they are happy with it and everything is in order as per their discussion, then what they do is they approve and they sign it. Of course, all of you know when you sign you have to always put the date. So, that goes together, signed and dated. So, the directors will approve and sign the prospectus. Once that is completed, one copy of the prospectus is filed with the Registrar of Companies. ROC is your Registrar of Companies. Then what is done? Now, once you file your prospectus with the ROC, within 90 days from that date, you have to issue your prospectus to the public. So, they give you that time period. So, within that time period, you have to issue a copy, you have to issue your prospectus to the public. Now, if companies do not issue a prospectus, as I said here, if no prospectus is issued, a statement in lieu of prospectus has to be filed with the registrar. Now, when this is done, a statement in lieu is issued when you already have buyers for your shares. Suppose the company people have their own family and friends who are ready to buy the shares. At that time, they don't issue a prospectus because they already have buyers for their shares. So, what they do is, but this document has to be filed with the ROC. So, what they do, instead of a prospectus, they issue a statement in lieu of the prospectus. So, I hope you have understood. This is regarding filing of prospectus. So, what is done here? A draft of the copy is shown to the directors. Once they approve it and they sign it, it will be filed with the ROC. Then from that date onwards, within 90 days, it has to be issued to the public. And if no prospectus is issued, companies have to issue a statement in lieu of prospectus. Then issue of prospectus. See, the directors invite the investors through the prospectus to subscribe for the shares. Each prospectus contains a blank application form. So, what the directors are doing? The directors are inviting investors. How they invite the investors? By issuing a prospectus. Okay, how will the public come to know about the shares? They will not know. So, in order to know about the shares, what they do is they issue a prospectus. And along with the prospectus, they give a blank application form, because after reading the prospectus and you are interested in buying the shares, you can fill in the application form and submit it to the company. Then next is appointment and arrangement with bankers. Now see, the directors of the company will have to take a decision about who the company's bankers are going to be. Because on application of shares, the company receives money. So where is this money going to be deposited? In which bank it is going to be deposited? That has to be decided, and you appoint your bankers in order to collect your application money. So as you can see here, the directors decide upon the company's bank. Okay, who is going to be your bank? Where the application money is deposited according to the prospectus. So in the prospectus, they will tell you how much money you have to pay on application. So according to that, they will deposit the money in the bank. Then this money remains in your bank in a special account. As you can read there, the application money collected by the bank is deposited in a special account called the share application money account. So this money remains in the bank in a special account, which is called as the share application money account. So it will remain there till further decisions will be taken. Then closure of application list. Closure means the list is kept open for a certain period of time, for a number of days. Now last time also I had told you when we were talking that the minimum number of days is 3 working days. As you can read on the screen, the subscription list will be kept open at least for 3 working days and a maximum of 10 working days. So you have to keep it open for a minimum of 3 days, but you can go up to a maximum of 10 days. Deciding according to the company's requirements, they will keep the shares. But this is how it is done. Then processing of applications. You have received all your application. Now these applications are sorted out. Now what is the meaning of sorted? Sorted means they are separated. They are separated according to equity shares and according to preference shares. Now what happens? Companies, to make their work easier, they may print the application forms for equity shares in one color, say if it is pink, and preference shares may be printed in, the color may be yellow. So what happens? Sorting out becomes very easy. So those who want equity shares will go in for pink, those who are applying for preference shares will go in for the yellow forms, yellow application. So at the time of sorting out, at the time of separating the forms, it becomes easy for the company. Then what they do, the secretary's work, this is, the incomplete forms are rejected. Rejected means they will not be allotted shares. They will be kept separately. Now what is the meaning of incomplete forms? Incomplete forms means if the form is not signed. if insufficient application money has been given. Suppose there are two joint holders, you can buy shares jointly, two people can buy shares at the same time, the same shares, not separately. How you have a joint bank account, you can buy shares jointly. Now, if one of the applicants has not signed the application form, then your forms are rejected. Then what is done? The details of each application are entered in a list called Share Application and Allotment List. So, what the secretary does, she will make one separate list now. All those who have applied for shares, and one column she keeps there, because as they allot shares to them, she will write how many shares are allotted to each applicant. Okay? So, a list is made. So, when you make a list, things becomes easy for you. You know who have applied for the shares and whom the company wants to distribute the shares. Okay, so next we go on to the next subheading, that is allotment of shares. So, I hope application is very clear to you. So, application is when you apply for shares and the company, you have to fill in your application form and you submit it to the bank. Now, in allotment of shares, as you can see, allotment of shares is distribution of shares to the applicants. Now, when I say distribution of shares to the applicants, it means only those who have applied for the shares will receive the shares. Now, suppose I have not applied for the shares, can the company allot me shares, give me shares? No. Okay, please remember that. So, distribution of shares to the applicants. They have not yet been allotted shares, they are the applicants, they have applied for the shares. Now, who distributes the shares? By the board of directors of the company. As I told you, all decisions in a company are taken by the BOD. So, over here you can see distribution of shares to the applicants by the BOD of the company. What they do? They allot shares to who have applied for. As I told you, only if you have applied for the shares, you get the shares. Otherwise, no shares are allotted to you. Now, we will see the provisions for allotment of shares. Now, as I told you, everything has provisions and they have procedure. Now, please do not get mixed up with these two answers. Provisions means what are the things that have to be fulfilled when allotment of shares is done. And procedure is how they go about distributing shares to the applicants. That is the difference. Understand the question first. Now, what are the conditions? Now, the first condition, again by default, as you can say, that means the board of directors of the company have the authority to allot shares. No one else has this authority. It is given only to the directors of the company. Now, when they allot shares, they have to go according to the Articles of Association of the company. Articles of Association of the company is a document of the company, okay, which governs the internal working of the company. So, always keeping in mind the rules which is given in this document, the Articles of Association, according to that they will allot the shares. Now, when you apply for the shares, the amount to be paid on application of shares should not be less than 5% of the face value of shares. Please remember, students. So, when you are applying for the shares, you do not pay the full amount of the shares. How much you are paying? Not less than 5% of the face value of shares. So, suppose the cost of the share is 100. I am taking a very small example so that it is easy for you to understand. Suppose the cost of a share is 100. How much will you pay? 5% of 100 is 5 rupees per share. So, on each share you will be paying 5 rupees. So, depending on the number of shares that you buy, but per share you will pay 5 rupees. This is just an example that I have given you. So, you have to remember that it is not less than 5% of the face value of shares. Then next, the allotment of shares is done according to the terms and conditions of the company. So, definitely the company is not going to just allot the shares like that. They will have their own terms and conditions. If those terms and conditions is suitable to the applicant, then he will apply for the shares. So, also when the company is allotting shares, they will see that their terms and conditions are fulfilled. Now, pay attention here to what I am telling you. Look at the screen, read the first point. 90% of the issue should be raised as minimum subscription. Now, we have studied what is minimum subscription in standard 11, but still I will just revise it with you. Minimum subscription is the minimum amount of capital a company has to receive from the public when they issue shares. Again, I will give you a very small example with a small amount so that you can understand. Now, suppose the company wants to raise rupees 10 lakhs by issuing shares. Suppose they are selling shares to the public, and after selling these shares, they are supposed to receive 10 lakhs. Now, according to the rule, they have to receive 90% of this. So, what is 90% of 10 lakhs? 9 lakhs. So, this amount is your minimum subscription. The company has to receive this amount. Okay, so, this is your first point. Now, the second point, the amount should be received by the company through a check within 30 days from the date of issue of prospectus. So, how do they have to receive it? Through a check, no cash or anything, through a check, and within how many days? Within a period of 30 days of the issue of prospectus. That means, once the prospectus is issued to the public, within this time period they have to receive this amount. Now, if they do not receive this amount within this time period, the amount should be returned to the applicants as prescribed. Okay, so, if you do not raise the minimum subscription, the amount has to be returned back to them. Okay, so, I hope this is clear to you. Now, the next provision. Now, once your allotment of shares is made, that means the company has distributed the shares to the applicants. Within a period of 30 days, a return of allotment has to be filed with the ROC, with the Registrar of Companies. So, all information, now when I say return of allotment, it means information with regard to allotment of shares. We are coming up to that, you will be studying what is return as to allotment. But this information is given to the Registrar of Companies within a period of 30 days. Now, the next point, within 60 days of receipt of application money, allotment should be made. So, once a period of 60 days is completed, the company should allot the shares to the applicants. If not, now if the company does not do it within this time period, the applicant, that means the person who has applied for the shares, may refuse to take the shares. He may say, I do not want the shares. Have you got me? Okay. So, it is a right of the applicant, if the shares are not allotted within the given time period by the company, okay, he has a right to refuse the shares after this time period. Now, maybe he waited and then the shares are not given to him, so he may say, I do not want the shares. So, the company cannot force him, you have applied, you have to take it. If it is within the given time period, yes, but if it has crossed the time limit, then the applicant can refuse to take the shares. Then the last condition over here, letter of allotment are sent to those whom shares are allotted. That means what? Once shares are allotted to you, once shares are distributed to you, they will send them a letter of allotment and a letter of regret. Now when you say regret, when you feel sorry for something, okay. So letters of regret are sent to those to whom shares are not allotted. So even if shares are not allotted to an applicant, the company shows courtesy by writing a letter to them informing them that no shares have been allotted to them. Okay. So I hope you are very clear with the provisions. Provisions or conditions means when the company is allotting shares, these conditions have to be fulfilled. Okay, now coming on to the next, so these are the provisions of allotment of shares. Now next what we are going to study is allotment procedure. Okay. Now allotment procedure, first point is you have to prepare your application list. So you have to make a list of all the shareholders who have applied for the shares. So that is your preparation of application list. You know, when you make a list of all the students or you make a list of all the people in the higher secondary, a list is made. Now, once this list for application of shares is made, the first point, look at the first point that are bids that are at or above the issue price, only shares will be allotted. So now to whom shares are allotted? Shares are allotted to those people who have applied for the shares, but at that particular price or above that price. If you have applied for shares below the face value, no shares will be allotted. So when I say at or above the issue price, it means at a certain price or above the face value of shares. If you have applied for shares below the face value, no shares will be allotted. Then the second point, the applicants are finalized. Now once you make your list, they will finalize your applicants. Who are the people who are going to receive the shares? Finalize means, okay, these are the people who applied for the shares and these are the people who are going to receive the shares. It is a final list. Then once that is made, the secretary prepares the application and allotment list. Because now they have finalized the application list, so they will allot shares only to those people. So that is the third point. The secretary prepares the application and allotment list. Then going on to the next point, allotment committee. So over here what it means, the board of directors appoint an allotment committee for allotment of shares. So now there may be many directors in the company, but all of them don't sit together to allot shares. Now passing a resolution they will do together. But allotting shares, what they do is they appoint a committee, maybe a smaller committee, maybe of 4 people or 5 people, a committee of 4 directors or 5 directors. Okay? So who is doing this? The board of directors. So among them, they may decide or they may take someone else in the committee. So here you can see the board of directors appoint an allotment committee for allotment of shares. So all the work this committee will have to do. They don't finally approve it, but they do the work. Okay? They do the work of allotment of shares. So who does the work? The allotment committee. Now there are 2 things you have to remember here. Shares may be oversubscribed or shares may be undersubscribed. Now I will give you an example to make this clear. Suppose companies are issuing 10,000 shares to the public and the public have applied for 12,000 shares. So what is the situation here? We have got more applicants than the number of shares issued by the company. Have you got me? We have got more applications than the number of shares that is going to be issued by the company. So, when such a situation arises, it is called as oversubscribed. And what is undersubscribed? Now, in our example of 10,000 shares which is issued to the public, and the public applies say for only 8,000 shares. Okay, they have applied for only 8,000 shares. They have not applied for the full 10,000. So, in this case what happens? The shares are undersubscribed. So, these are the two situations that a company has to face: oversubscription or undersubscription. The meaning I hope is clear to all of you. Then, now see, if a situation arises of undersubscription, if they are undersubscribed, all the applicants will get the shares. So, they are lucky because the company is issuing 10,000 shares, we have got 8,000 applications. So, we can give everyone the shares? Yes? Okay. So, all the applicants will receive the shares, because in a situation when it is under subscription, all the applicants will receive the shares. And if it is oversubscribed, okay, now here there is a slight hitch. If it is oversubscribed, each investor will be allotted a minimum number of shares according to their availability. So, what the company tries to do, they try to give at least some minimum amount to the applicants. Suppose you have applied for 100 shares, they may give you 80 shares. Suppose you have applied for 50 shares, they may give you 40 shares. Okay? So, what they are trying to do over here, at least a minimum number of shares they will try to give you. Now, this is in a case of oversubscription. So, dear students, please understand the meaning of undersubscription. Under means we have got lesser amount of applicants than the number of shares issued by the company. And oversubscription means we have received more application for shares than the number of shares issued by the company. So, these are the two situations. Then once this is done, the allotment company prepares a report and submits it to the board of directors. As I told you, ultimately it is the board of directors of the company who have to decide finally on everything. But what the committee does, read right on top, the allotment committee, they are doing all the work and preparing a report. This is how it can be done. But who finalizes this is the board of directors. Now, the next point, as we said, board approval. So, the board of directors call for a meeting, and in their meeting they will pass a resolution with regard to allotment of shares. You can see on the screen that they are having their meeting and they are discussing about allotment of shares. But when they are allotting shares, I told you they have to follow the rules or provisions given in the articles of association. So, this is what they have to do. When they are passing their approval, they have to also keep in mind the rules regarding the articles of association of the company. Then next we go to communication. The applicants are informed about allotment of shares. Now see, I apply for the shares, I am an applicant. So now the company is going to inform me about the allotment of shares. So whose work it is now? The secretary. You can see the secretary doing the work. She is sending a letter of allotment, and when she sends the letter of allotment, she has to fill in all the details. What details are there? Name and address of the applicant, whoever has applied for the shares and the company is allotting shares to them, distributing shares to them. She will write their name and address, how many shares, the date, okay, total amount, how much it comes. That is a lot of information. So, all those details on the letter of allotment will be filled in by the secretary. So, this work is the work of the secretary. So, the secretary's work is to communicate about the allotment of shares to the applicants. Then we go on to the next point. Arrangement with companies' bankers. The secretary makes arrangement with the company's bankers to receive allotment money. As I told you, the application money, how it was submitted to the bank along with your application form. Like that, over here, when you are paying the money on allotment of shares, the secretary makes arrangement with the company's bankers and they will receive the allotment money. Okay, so the arrangements have to be made. The company always takes the help of banks while doing this work. Then what the secretary has to do? All of you know what is a register of members, but I will revise with you. A register of members is a register wherein all the details of the shareholders are entered in this book. The name of the shareholder, type of shares, number of shares, face value, okay, all this information is entered in the register of members. So, what the secretary will do now? The secretary will prepare a register of members, and from where will she prepare it? She will take that application and allotment list, because according to that list we have allotted shares to the applicants. We have distributed the shares to the applicants. Okay. So, with that form she will take and she will enter the details in the register of members. Okay. A register, I hope you have understood, like how you in class your teacher takes your attendance in a class attendance register. Okay. So, that is a register, but here it is a register for members. Members are the shareholders of the company. Then the next point, after that is done, the secretary has to prepare and issue share certificates. Okay. Once all this work is completed, the secretary has to prepare and issue a share certificate. Now, what is the time period given to her? She has to prepare the share certificate within 3 months from the date of allotment of shares. Okay. So, within what time period she has to get this ready? Within a period of 3 months. And when they take the share certificate from the company, they have to give that allotment letter. Remember earlier I told you the secretary sends a letter of allotment. So, in exchange for that letter of allotment, they will receive their share certificate. And then filing of return as to allotment. Again I told you, all information of allotment has to be filed with the ROC. So, again you will see here the secretary has to file a return of allotment with the ROC within 30 days of allotment of shares. Again the return contains the name, address, number of shares. So, all the details regarding shares it will contain the return of allotment, and this has to be filed with the ROC within a period of 30 days. So, now again a small slide telling you what is a return as to allotment. So, I told you that within 30 days all information of allotment has to be filed with the ROC. Now, what does it contain? It contains the number and nominal amount of the shares allotted. Number means whether 5 shares, 10 shares, 15 shares, 100 shares, that is the meaning of number, and nominal amount means how much is the value of your share. Then, who are the people whom the company have allotted shares to? Their name, address, occupation. Okay? That details about the person to whom shares have been allotted. Then amount paid or due on each share. Now, suppose you have paid say 30 rupees on a share of rupees 100. So, that is the amount paid, and how much is due? 70 rupees per share I am talking about. Okay? So, those details are written. Particulars of shares allotted. Okay? What are the particulars? The details of the shares that are allotted. And if the company is issuing bonus shares, okay, or shares issued at a discount. Discount means at a lesser price than the face value. Those details have to be filed with the ROC within a period of 30 days. So, I hope this is clear to you, because now I am going on to the next subheading, and that is calls on shares. Now, calls on shares. Read the first top part, what is on the screen. Company makes a demand on its shareholders. See, a company makes a demand on its shareholders. What demand is it making? To pay a part or the whole of the unpaid balance. Now, I told you, or you have already come to know, that on application you are paying 5% of the face value of shares, not less than 5% of the face value of shares. On allotment, again you are paying certain amount to the bank when shares are allotted to you. Okay? So, whenever the company makes a demand to pay the amount on the shares, it may be a part of the amount, or suppose the certain amount is balance, they may ask the whole of the unpaid balance, the remaining balance. Okay? And when they demand for it, again as I told you, you have to follow the provisions of the Articles of Association, the rules in the Articles of Association. So, what is calls on shares? So, calls on shares is nothing but when a company makes a demand on its shareholders to pay a part or the whole of the unpaid balance, and this is done following the provisions of the Articles of Association. Now, as I told you, each has its conditions and provisions and the procedure. So, what are the conditions for calls on shares? Now, the first one, a gap of 1 month should be there between two calls. So, now suppose the company has made a call on 1st of June. Before 1st of July, the company cannot make another call. At least a gap of 1 month should be there between two calls. Am I clear? So, keep a gap of 1 month and then you can ask for the money after 1 month. Now, when the company is making a call on shares, when the company is demanding for the money, a notice of 14 days is given to the shareholders to pay the call amount. How many days notice is given? 14 days. See, because if I tell you bring the money tomorrow, you may not have money with you. You have to also make arrangement for the money. So, what the company does is, they give them a notice of 14 days in which to pay the call money. When they are calling up the amount on the shares, the amount of call should not exceed 25% of the face value of shares. Okay? So, if the face value of a share is 100, they cannot call up more than 25 rupees per share at one time. After 1 month again they can ask for another 25%. Okay? So, the amount of call should not exceed 25% of the face value of shares. There should be no distinction made between shareholders of the same class. Now, what is the meaning of distinction? Do not make a difference. The meaning of distinction means do not make a difference between shareholders of the same class. Suppose you are calling up the call on shares for equity shareholders. All the equity shareholders will pay the same amount on the same date, at the same time, at the same place. No difference is made. Now, preference shareholders is another group. So, there they will be asked to pay the amount again on a date, time and place. But in equity shareholders, suppose you have 500 equity shareholders, you cannot say, okay, 300 of you all pay on 15th of August and remaining pay at the end of the month. No distinction is made, no difference is made between the shareholders of the same class. Okay. In respect to what? What is the difference? The call money, how much money you are calling up, the place where they are supposed to pay and the date of payment. So, all of them pay the same amount on the same date and the same place. That is the meaning of no distinction. Then the last point, the amount called up by the company but which remains unpaid on the specific date is said to be in arrears. Now suppose I had told you to pay the money by 30th of June and you have not paid the money. That money is said to be in arrears. You are supposed to pay it, but you have not paid it on that particular date. So that is called as calls in arrears. Arrears. Please make a note of the last word there. It is said to be in arrears because you owe the company the money, but you have not paid the money. And next is you have something that is known as calls in advance. Now what is this calls in advance? See, the amount received by the company before a call is made is known as calls in advance. The company has not asked for the money, but you want to pay the money to the company. Now there may be various reasons. Usually people don't do it, but suppose I realize I have so much money with me and I don't want to keep the money because I may spend the money. I may spend it. So what I do, I tell the company my money is still left on shares which is to be paid. You have not asked for the money, but I want to pay the money in advance. So if the provision is in the Articles of Association, it can be done. So have you understood the meaning of advance? The company has not asked for the money, but you are paying the money for your own personal reasons. But the company will accept it if a clause is given in the Articles of Association. But let me tell you, dear students, see here, the Companies Act 2013 specifies a maximum rate of interest of 12% to be provided by the company on calls in advance. So even though you are paying your money in advance, you are getting interest on that money. You are earning something on that money, which is very good. So the company is paying you interest on that advanced amount, only on the advanced amount at the rate of 12%. Then as I told you, a company can receive the calls in advance if it is authorized by its Articles of Association. So this provision has to be made in the articles. Now some companies may not have their own Articles of Association. So what do? They follow table F. Please remember this. They follow table F. So what is table F? The last point you read, when a company has no Articles of Association of its own, the provisions of table F of the Companies Act 2013 will apply. So you can adopt this for your company or you can make your own Articles of Association. So I hope this is clear to you because I am going on to the procedure of making a call on shares. Students, please remember, do not jump from one point to the third point. You have to go in a particular order. So what is the first thing? The first is a board meeting. The secretary arranges a BOD meeting where they pass a resolution to make a call. So as I told you, this may sound repetitive to you, but you have to register in your mind that it is the board of directors who take any decision in the company. So this will be repetitive to you in all the procedures. Okay, so this is one of the main points that is there. Then what is done? Closing of books. The BOD have to pass another resolution to close all the transfer books and the register of members. Register of members, I told you, is a register that is maintained by the company where all information about shareholders are entered in this book. Now you have closure of transfer books. You cannot transfer your shares to another person. So what they are doing at that moment when calls are made, you cannot transfer your shares. So they close the transfer books also. Then the next point, a call list is made. As you can see, our secretary is making a list and ticking mark to whom call letters have to be sent. So the secretary prepares a call list of the members to whom call letters are to be issued. So what the secretary is doing here, she has made a list and okay, who are the people who have to receive these letters. Then what she does, she has to draft the letter. Okay, so she makes a draft of the letter and she gives it to the BOD for approval. Now this call letter is divided into 3 parts: call letter, call receipt and call slip. Okay, this letter is divided into 3 parts. There is a reason for this, because when you go to pay the money in the bank, okay, the bank stamps the receipt. The first 2 parts are given to the shareholder and the last part is kept with the bank, which they submit to the company once the calls on shares is done. Okay, issue of call letters. So the call letters are sent to the registered address of the shareholder, and a notice is also published in the newspaper where they come to know that a company has made a demand on calls on shares. Then the company secretary makes arrangement with the bankers. As I told you, the bankers only the bankers help us in order to receive all the transactions. So the bankers will receive the call money, and where a separate account is opened with the bank. Then the secretary enters all the details of the call list in the register of members. That means who all have paid the call money, she will make an entry in the register of members. And last, what she is going to do, she is making a list of defaulters. Now who are defaulters? See, the secretary prepares a list of defaulters, that is the shareholders who have not paid the call money, and place it before the board of directors. So they were supposed to pay the call money because a call letter is sent to them, but they have not paid the money. So these people are called as defaulters. Okay, so with this we finish our procedure of calls on shares.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.